On today's podcast, we're fortunate to have with us Jake Kilrain, who holds senior management positions across a diverse spectrum of technology companies. And we'd like to talk with him most specifically about when he started out in management.
Hi, I'm Rick Kendall.
And I'm Fred Ball.
Welcome to Management Mastery. The purpose of these podcasts is to share what each of us has learned about good and bad management in our combined over 40 years of experience, both as managers and executive coaches. During that time, we've coached managers at every level in companies from Fortune 100s to brand new startups in all major businesses, including nonprofits, government, and education. So whether you're just starting in your first management position or are an experienced manager looking to strengthen your management skills, we know our podcast will be valuable to you.
So, Jake, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. As I became a manager, I look back at some of the challenges. This caused me to really put some thought into kind of what transitioned at that time as I was a new manager, right? And,
right.
Not unlike a lot of instances across what happens is that a company will take, or a sales organization will take their most prolific salesperson, their best salesperson, and because they're the best salesperson, they think they should promote them to sales manager. And what I found is that that's not always the case. There are people that are what I would consider professional salespeople that have no aspiration to be a manager, that want to be an individual contributor and are really successful at being an individual contributor. Rather than just blindly kind of promoting the best salesperson into a leadership role, you've got a company has to do some due diligence and some significant work to make sure that person, is first of all, is that person's goal to be a sales leader.
That's a good
right?
point.
I mean, is it what they want to do? So like most situations, or in a lot of situations, I was in a situation where I had been fortunate enough to be a very successful salesperson, and I was tapped to now become the leader of that group.
And obviously it was something that you were interested in doing.
Well, it was. That's the other thing that it kind of is interesting because that was kind of my career path, right? And I give that background of people that oftentimes companies just take the best salesperson and put them in without any coaching or skills and expect them to be able to become successful.
Jake, what would you say was one or two of the things that surprised you the most when you went from salesperson to manager?
I think the biggest thing was, as I look back on it, it was significantly more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Right? I mean, I thought that I was going to be able to take, here I am out and I'm prospecting and I'm working and I'm qualifying deals and I'm moving them through the pipeline and I'm getting them to the point where they're forecastable, and then I'm closing deals and I'm managing my own territory. Now I've got, it's like that question, it's like, do you have any kids? No. Well, why do you want 5 or 6 kids? Right? Like, why would you want to take on 5 or 6 kids? And I'm like, well, I think I can bring some value to what, raising them and moving them along through the pipeline. But the biggest thing, I thought I was going to be able to just roll up their forecast, determine what a most likely number was to the organization, and that I was now backing out of this the real hard, heavy lifting of qualifying deals and moving things along. So, I would say the biggest thing one of the biggest surprises I had. It was significantly more difficult than I had anticipated that it was going to be. And there's a variety of reasons for that, right?
Well, give us a couple.
Well, it's the coaching and the talent, right? And the retention, and are people in the right roles? Are they mapped to the right accounts? How do you know you have the right people wrapped to the right accounts? And do you have the right people? So you have the right people on board, right? And so there's this whole assessing talent and about retention and whether or not I have the right people, and do I have to have some difficult conversations? And if you're a manager like I was, coming from the same company, I'm now managing my peers, right? And that's a challenge that I don't think enough companies talk about and coach people that they're moving up in the organization. That's a significant challenge. You've got somebody that's now a peer, that was formerly a peer, that now you're responsible for managing, and candidly may have to have some tough conversations with.
Jake, when that happened, when you got promoted, did you notice, did your peers suddenly change in terms of how they reacted to you?
Yeah, what happened is, it kind of becomes one of those situations where, if you think about it, just in human dynamics, right? I mean, here was this person that was an associate who I could probably consider a friend, who's now responsible for, my overall well-being at the company, right? That can now make hire and fire decisions, right? And so I think there's always a situation where people are going to be skeptical about how you're going to react now as a manager, right? And are you going to serve my best interest, or is it a parochial view, right? And I think that's one of the things, and I'll come back to this, is the other thing that as new managers you've got to learn this, because as a salesperson that had done pretty well in my accounts, and I had won all the awards. I had the I love me wall of plaques on the wall about top salesperson for this and that. I mean, this is no longer about you, right? When you become a manager, what I would tell you is that you have to check your ego at the door, because this is no longer about you. So the sooner that people can pick up on that, I think the sooner people are going to integrate into the organization and kind of get behind the vision, right? I mean, as soon as they can trust you that this isn't about you any longer, this is about them. I think that's kind of part of the secret sauce.
Interesting, yeah.
So what we heard was that it was a surprise that it was more work than I thought, and then secondly, you've got to check your own ego at the door.
Yeah, I would say that is, it's significant. It is. It's just much harder than I think a lot of people have perspective, and that's something that can be coached from an organization, right? Are you giving people? I don't think you flip the switch and just say, okay, you go from salesperson to manager. It's like when I had people that had aspirations to be in management, I would give them sort of projects that would, give them more visibility around the organization, right? Whether that was in finance or legal or operations, right? I had them touching other parts of the organization so that it could get some broader visibility. But I don't think you just flip the switch and say, oh, you're a manager now.
Right. Well, too often, as you said, it's done by by flipping the switch and having somebody become a manager. But then what happens is that they're making a lot of mistakes and learning on the job as they go.
Well, that was certainly my experience. That was certainly my experience, right? And it maps to. I can tell you, there's a lot of people that fall into that category, that get promoted because they were successful as an individual contributor.
Yep. So in terms of the greatest challenge as a manager, you've again and again mentioned the people that you supervised, what you had to do with them, the hard conversations sometimes, the good conversations when someone said, I want to be a manager, and you started to help them. What can you tell us, can you give us an example of one of the challenges that you had with an individual?
Yeah, there's a number of them that occurred during my career, and I think some of the more difficult ones were the ones that resulted you're a friend and a peer of this person. Now you're their manager, and you always sort of looked at them when you were a peer, if they were underperforming, and say, well, that's not what I would do, or I would, to yourself, you're going through this process. But for me, the toughest challenge was recognizing underperformance and doing something about it quickly, right? Like recognizing that a rep was and it's not a personal thing. It's not a personal vendetta. It's just that some people sometimes are in the wrong role. And generally, if that person is underperforming, they're not happy with it, right? So getting that person the skills and abilities they need to be successful in that role, or whether managing them out of the organization into something else, I found that to be really a significant challenge, you become better at it as you go through your career. But having initial tough conversations with somebody, especially a peer, is a pretty difficult challenge, right? But I think, to the extent that you have these development conversations, you can't make it personal, right? It's observations that you're not doing the right things. You're not making the contacts. You're not calling high enough in the organization. You're not broad and deep enough in an organization. And how do we address that, right? And maybe you were hired into the wrong role. So I would say, recognizing underperformance.
One of the things that we'd like to talk about is, are there any missteps that you made as a manager?
Too many. I looked at this from some sort of a practical standpoint, and just, I think the missteps that I made is that is having going back a step, right? As a sales rep, is having a common methodology for how you define what a deal looks like, right? Having common vernacular, right? Like, for instance, reps will game the CRM system, right? Like if you look at kind of a forecasting system or whatever the company uses, right? Like most likely, the term most likely means, in my vernacular, most likely means it's going to happen in that quarter. Well, five reps may have five different opinions of what most likely looks like, if it's not a standardized protocol, right? And so there's a lot of sales selling systems out there, solution selling. I became a fan. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term MEDDIC. And I like this MEDDIC methodology because it ensures a consistency across the board. And when you say most likely and I say most likely, we're on the same level.
Yeah, it sounds like what you did is you brought much more system approach to the sales process when you became the manager, and if you saw that it wasn't there initially, you put it in place.
the common vernacular and a common system for evaluating deals.
So let's look at skills and abilities that you learned as a manager.
Well, I think there's a lot of them, and part of the skill is becoming, I think, more of a competent business person, right? I mean, and in the roles that I had, it was difficult to become an expert in each of the vertical industries that we were calling on in every of the vertical companies. But I really sort of became a student of finance. One of the things is, forecasting, right? So when I was forecasting to my vice president or my general manager, right? I can remember a conversation I had where, I had a manager working for me, and we were having a forecast call, and I'm talking to the manager, and he's like, "Well, the rep says this about this deal," and I'm listening to him, and I let him finish the conversation, and then the next week we're having the conversation, and he said, "The rep said this about the deal," and I stopped the call. It was a one-on-one call, so I stopped the call and I said, "Well, what do I need you for? If the rep says this, what?" So my point was, why aren't you in the deal? This is one of the biggest opportunities you have in your forecast, and you're not involved in the deal. So, we hung up the call, and then the rep tried to call, and then the manager tried to call me like 3 times. I didn't take his call, but the next week when we had that conversation, he had met the account. He was much more in tune with the opportunity. So that was a moment for a little coaching.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I think you have. I mean, you have talked about the surprises when you first came into the business. You talked about the being humble. You talked about the fact that when you first got in, you realized that the systems were not appropriate, so you changed them. And now more recently, in terms of skills and abilities, it's so many of the issues that you have as managers have to do with people, managing people, coaching people, and handling people.
I would say, as a new manager, it's a huge challenge, right? I mean, you're going from your individual success to now the success of multiple people across your organization, and I would say the other thing, check your ego, we're always told to be to listen. The old adage is like you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And being able to listen is a skill, and I think people overlook that, and today in particular, people are in, I don't know, I find that people are in a constant state of partial attention, right? I mean, there's texting, and there's tweeting, and there's Instagram, and there's there's email, and there's phone calls, and so as a new manager, what I would tell you is that you've got to keep that separate, and you've got to be able to focus when a rep's talking to you, when anybody's talking to you. You've got to be able to just put all those distractions aside and listen, really listen to what people are saying to you, and so those are big ones, right? Because that you're talking about credibility, and if people don't think you're listening to them, you're not gonna make a connection. It's just not gonna happen. So,
Jake, look, this has been great. We really appreciate your wisdom, and we want to thank you very much for the time that you've put in with us.
It's a pleasure.
Again, our thanks to Jake Kilrain for sharing his experience and wisdom about becoming a new manager. We hope you have found this podcast useful and will come back again for more management mastery. If you have any comments about this or any of our episodes, or would like to find out more about our other services, including one-on-one coaching and group seminars for managers, visit our website at careercoachclass.com. Thanks for listening.